Commander Elaine Chen stood at the viewport of the Persistence, watching the swirling nebula that marked the boundary of Nexian space. The cosmic cloud glowed in hues of emerald and azure, beautiful and serene, and absolutely forbidden to her kind. Quite the view, isn't it? Admiral Takahashi's voice came from behind her. Elaine turned, straightening her posture instinctively. It is, sir, though I prefer to see what's on the other side. Takahashi smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. After 40 years in the United Earth Force, the old man had earned every one of those lines. Wouldn't we all? But you know why I've called you here. I do, sir. Elaine nodded. Project Trojan Horse. Your mission, Commander, is simple in concept but nearly impossible in execution. The Admiral's expression turned grave. You will enter Nexian space, establish diplomatic contact, and convince them to lift the prohibition against humanity. With all due respect, sir, the Nexians have made their position quite clear for the past 80 years. No human vessels, no human signals, no human anything within their territory, which happens to span nearly a quarter of the galaxy. And that's precisely why we can't accept their terms any longer. Takahashi gestured toward the stars beyond the viewport. We have expanded as far as we can in other directions. We have terraformed every viable rock, established colonies on every habitable moon, but our population continues to grow. Either we find a way to coexist with the Nexians, or humanity stagnates. Elaine nodded. She'd seen the projections. Within 50 years, human expansion would grind to a halt. Within 100, resource scarcity would begin to bite. Within 200, the decline would be irreversible. What makes you think I can succeed where 80 years of diplomatic missions have failed? She asked. Because you're not going in as a diplomat. The Admiral handed her a data chip. This contains everything we know about the Nexians. Isn't much. What we do know is that they're the most technologically advanced species we have encountered. They have been spacefaring for at least 50,000 years. They have constructed Dyson spheres, moved stars, engineered entire ecosystems. And yet, despite all that power, they have never attempted to destroy us or drive us back. They don't need to, Elaine said. Their prohibition is enough. Exactly. Which means they have some reason for keeping us out that isn't simple xenophobia or fear. Find out what that reason is, and maybe, just maybe, we can negotiate. Elaine studied the data chip in her palm. How am I getting past their detection systems? They have intercepted every probe we have sent. That's where Dr. Park comes in. Takahashi pressed a button on his wrist communicator. Doctor, join us, please. The door slid open, and a lanky woman with a perpetual squint entered. Her lab coat was wrinkled, as if she'd slept in it. Knowing Dr. Park's reputation, she probably had. Commander Chun. Dr. Park nodded curtly. I have been modifying a shuttle for your mission. The Nexians use a form of quantum entanglement for their detection grid. Elegant, really. But quantum systems have their vulnerabilities. You have found a way to fool their sensors. Elaine couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice, Doctor. Park's lips curved in the ghost of smile. Not exactly. I have found a way to confuse them. The shuttle's hull is coated with a metamaterial that scatters quantum readings. To their sensors, you will appear as a fluctuation in the background radiation. Not a ship, not a probe, just an anomaly that their systems will likely dismiss as a data glitch. Likely, nothing certain, Commander, but it's the best chance we have. Elaine looked back at the nebula. Beyond that beautiful barrier lay a civilization so advanced that humanity might as well be ants in comparison. And yet, here she was about to kick the anthill. When do I leave? Tomorrow, Takahashi answered. The shuttle is prepped and waiting in Hangar 3. This is a solo mission, Commander. If you are detected, we need to maintain plausible deniability. Understood, sir. Elaine tightened her grip on the data chip. I will review the intel tonight. Good. The Admiral's gaze was solemn. The future of our species may very well rest on what you discover, Commander Chen. No pressure. Elaine managed a tight smile. None at all, sir. The shuttle was unlike any vessel Elaine had piloted before. Designated the Whisper, it was sleek and small, barely large enough for a single occupant. Its hull gleamed with an oily iridescence, the metamaterial Dr. Park had mentioned. The controls are standard, Dr. Park explained as they walked around the craft. but there are a few modifications you should be aware of. The propulsion system is completely passive once you are past the nebula boundary. No emissions, no radiation signature. You will be coasting on momentum alone. That limits my mobility considerably, Elaine noted. Yes, but it also makes you much harder to detect. The life support systems are similarly passive. Chemical scrubbers for CO2, thermal regulation through phase change materials. Nothing that generates a signature. How long can I survive on passive systems? 3 weeks, comfortably. For if you're willing to get a bit ripe. Dr. Park handed her a small metallic cube, no larger than a die. This is your emergency beacon. Activate it only as a last resort. It will punch a quantum signal through to our receiver buoys, but the Nexians will detect it immediately. Elaine pocketed the cube. In a return trip, you will have enough fuel for one burn to get you back to the nebula. Once you are in the cloud, we can retrieve you without alerting the Nexians. Dr. Park hesitated, assuming they let you leave, of course. Reassuring, Doctor, I'm a scientist, Commander. I deal in facts, not comfort. Dr. Park's expression softened slightly. But for what it's worth, I'm confident in the technology. The rest is up to you. Elaine nodded and climbed into the Whisper's cockpit. It was cramped but efficiently designed, with a gel-padded seat that would support her during high-G maneuvers. The control interfaces were minimalist, a holographic display and haptic controls that responded to subtle finger movements. One last thing, Dr. Park said, leaning in. The mission parameters indicate reconnaissance and diplomacy, but we both know there's more to it. She placed a small black case beside Elaine's seat. If you manage to make contact, this might help bridge the technological gap. It's a quantum computation core, the most advanced we have built. It's configured to interface with any system it encounters, given enough time. I didn't think we were sending gifts. We are not. This is for your use only. Knowledge is power, Commander. If you want to understand why the Nexians have quarantined us, you might need to access their databases. Dr. Park stepped back. Good luck. The cockpit sealed with a hiss, and Elaine was alone. She ran through the pre-flight checks methodically, falling back on years of training to calm her nerves. The mission ahead was daunting, but she'd faced impossible odds before. During the Mars crisis, she'd navigated a failing dropship through a dust storm to rescue colonists. In the asteroid belt, she'd outmaneuvered raiders to deliver critical medical supplies. But this was different. This wasn't about individual lives or isolated colonies. This was about the future of humanity itself. The hangar doors parted, revealing the velvet backdrop of space. Elaine engaged the Whisper's engines, and the shuttle glided forward, leaving the Persistence behind. As she accelerated toward the nebula, she activated the quantum scattering field. Whisper to Persistence, she transmitted. Scattering field active. Beginning approach to the nebula boundary. Persistence to Whisper, came the reply. We read you, Commander. Godspeed. The transmission ended, and Elaine was truly alone. The nebula loomed ahead, a swirling mass of gas and cosmic dust that had fascinated astronomers for centuries. It wasn't a natural formation. The Nexians had engineered it as a boundary marker, a cosmic no-trespassing sign. Elaine eased the Whisper into the nebula's outer layers. The view outside became obscured by luminous clouds, and the shuttle's sensors struggled to maintain a clear reading. This was expected. The nebula disrupted conventional sensors, creating a natural barrier to navigation. For nearly an hour, Elaine navigated through the glowing mist, relying on inertial guidance and the occasional clear patch to orient herself. Then, abruptly, she broke through. The view that greeted her stole her breath away. Where she had expected more of the endless void of space, punctuated by distant stars, she instead found herself at the edge of what appeared to be a vast artificial construct. It stretched as far as her eyes could see, a latticework of gleaming metal and crystalline structures that caught the light of a nearby star and fractured it into rainbow patterns. My God, Elaine whispered. According to the mission briefing, the Nexians had been observed constructing massive habitats, but nothing had prepared her for the sheer scale of what lay before her. This wasn't a space station or a collection of satellites. This was architecture on a cosmic scale, a habitat that could house billions, perhaps trillions of beings. Elaine engaged the optical telescopes, capturing detailed images of the structure. The Whisper's computer analyzed the data, estimating the construct's dimensions at roughly 1/5 the diameter of Earth's moon. As she drifted closer, carried by momentum, Elaine noticed movement along the structure's surface. Tiny points of light detached from the main body and moved in coordinated patterns. Ships, she realized. Nexian vessels, going about their business, completely unaware of the human observer in their midst, for now, at least. Elaine checked the status of the quantum scattering field. Still operational, still disguising her presence as a mere fluctuation in the cosmic background radiation. But she couldn't rely on it indefinitely. She needed to find a way to observe the Nexians more closely, to understand their society, and, hopefully, the reason behind their quarantine of humanity. She directed the Whisper toward what appeared to be a less trafficked area of the structure, using minimal thruster adjustments to avoid detection. As she drew closer, details emerged. The lattice wasn't merely a frame. It housed countless modules and structures, all interconnected in a complex three-dimensional network. After several hours of cautious approach, Elaine found what she was looking for, a docking bay of sorts, where smaller vessels attached themselves to the main structure. She positioned the Whisper a safe distance away and deployed a passive optical reconnaissance drone, a device no larger than her thumb that would transmit visual data back to the shuttle. The drone drifted toward the docking bay, its mirrored surface reflecting the surrounding space, rendering it nearly invisible. Through its feed, Elaine got her first glimpse of the Nexians themselves. They were not what she had expected. Based on the limited data available to humanity, she had imagined the Nexians as physically imposing beings, perhaps even terrifying in their alienness. Instead, what she saw were slender, almost delicate creatures. They moved with fluid grace on three limbs that served as both legs and manipulators. Their bodies shimmered with a bioluminescent glow that shifted in patterns, communication, perhaps, or emotional expression. Elaine watched, fascinated, as the Nexians went about their activities. They seemed peaceful, orderly. There was no obvious military presence, no weapons that she could discern. Just beings going about their daily lives in their enormous, magnificent habitat. Why the prohibition against humanity? What threat could humans possibly pose to a civilization capable of such wonders? As she pondered this question, a flashing alert on her console jolted her back to reality. The quantum scattering field was fluctuating, still functional, but showing signs of instability. Dr. Park had warned that the technology was experimental, that it might not maintain its effectiveness indefinitely. Elaine needed to accelerate her mission. Passive observation would take too long. She needed to access Nexian data to understand their history, their culture, their reasons for isolating humanity. She recalled Dr. Park's gift, the quantum computation core. If she could interface it with Nexian systems, she might find answers. But that would require direct access to their technology, which meant taking an enormous risk. Elaine studied the drone's feed, focusing on the docking bay. The Nexian vessels came and went in a predictable pattern. If she timed it right, she might be able to slip the Whisper into the bay during a lull in traffic, attach the quantum core to their systems, and retreat before anyone noticed that IT was a desperate plan, fraught with danger. If she was detected, the diplomatic fallout could be catastrophic. But the alternative, returning to Earth with nothing but visual data, was unacceptable. Taking a deep breath, Elaine plotted her approach. She would have one chance. If she misjudged the timing, if the quantum scattering field failed at the wrong moment, if the Nexians' internal security was more sophisticated than she anticipated, any of these factors could spell disaster. But as Admiral Takahashi had said, the future of humanity might rest on what she discovered. The risk was justified. Elaine engaged the Whisper's engines, burning precious fuel to position herself for the approach. The docking bay loomed larger in her view screen, a cavernous space illuminated by the same ethereal light that the Nexians themselves emitted. "Here goes nothing," she murmured and guided the shuttle forward. The Whisper slipped into the docking bay during a brief window between departing vessels, its quantum scattering field bending light around its hull, rendering it nearly invisible to casual observation. Elaine guided it to an unoccupied niche in the bay's wall, using the gentlest touch on the controls to avoid creating disturbances in the air that might betray her presence. Once docked, she had to move quickly. The scattering field was draining power at an alarming rate, and the longer she remained, the greater the chance of detection. Donning a lightweight EVA suit, more for protection against unknown elements than vacuum, as the bay was pressurized, Elaine exited the Whisper with a quantum computation core secure in a pouch at her waist. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth standard, giving her movements a buoyant quality. She moved cautiously along the wall, staying in shadow, observing the Nexians from close range. Their movements were hypnotic, almost dance-like, and their bioluminescent patterns shifted in complex sequences that suggested a language far more nuanced than human speech. Near the bay's entrance, Elaine spotted what appeared to be a control interface, a crystalline panel embedded in the wall, pulsing with the same pattern she observed in Nexian communication. This was her target. Creeping forward, she reached the panel and removed the quantum core from its pouch. The device was designed to interface with alien technology, to learn and adapt to new systems. But it needed time that Elaine wasn't sure she had. She pressed the core against the crystalline surface, watching as it pulsed in response, its quantum processors attempting to establish a connection. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, the crystal's patterns began to synchronize with the core's pulses. IT was working. The quantum core was interfacing with Nexian technology. Elaine glanced around nervously. The bay remained relatively quiet, with only a few Nexians moving about at distance. None seemed to have noticed the human intruder or the unauthorized access to their systems. The quantum core surface displayed a progress indicator: 10%, 15%, 20%. It was downloading data from the Nexian network, translating it into a format that human technology could interpret. But it was painfully slow. At 35%, Elaine noticed a change in the bay's atmosphere. The ambient light shifted slightly, taking on a reddish hue. The few Nexians present suddenly ceased their activities, their bioluminescent patterns freezing in what Elaine instinctively recognized as alarm. They knew. Somehow, they had detected the intrusion. The quantum core was at 42% when the first security response arrived, a group of Nexians moving with purposeful speed toward the control interface. Unlike the others, these beings wore what appeared to be form-fitting armor that enhanced their bioluminescence, making them shine like beacons. Elaine had seconds to decide. The core needed more time to complete its download, but if she waited, she would certainly be captured. If she aborted now, she might escape with partial data, but it could be insufficient to determine why humanity was quarantined. The security Nexians were halfway across the bay when Elaine made her choice. She grabbed the quantum core, terminating the download at 47%, and sprinted back toward the Whisper. The lighter gravity allowed her to move faster than she could on Earth, but it also made her trajectory more predictable. That a beam of focused light struck the wall beside her, a warning shot. The Nexians were armed after all, though their weapons seemed designed to incapacitate rather than kill. Elaine reached the Whisper and practically threw herself into the cockpit, sealing it behind her. The shuttle systems responded to her frantic commands, disengaging from the docking niche and powering up its engines. Another beam hit the shuttle's hull, causing the quantum scattering field to flicker and fail. The Whisper was now fully visible to every sensor in the bay. No choice now, Elaine muttered, and pushed the engines to full power. The Whisper shot out of the docking bay like a bullet, accelerating at a rate that pressed Elaine back in her seat with crushing force. Behind her, several Nexian vessels detached from their docks, giving pursuit. Elaine had one advantage. The Whisper was smaller and more maneuverable than the Nexian ships. She weaved through the lattice of the massive habitat, using its structures as cover, pushing the shuttle to its limits. But the Nexians had superior technology and the home field advantage. For every move Elaine made, they countered, gradually closing the distance. And ahead of her, more vessels were moving to intercept, creating a net that would trap her before she could reach the Nebula. Elaine checked the quantum core, now connected to the Whisper systems. The partial download had yielded terabytes of data, but without time to analyze it, she couldn't know if it contained the answers she sought. A warning chime alerted her to an incoming transmission. The Nexians were attempting to communicate. After a moment of hesitation, Elaine accepted the connection. The Whisper's display filled with shifting patterns of light, Nexian language, untranslatable to human senses. But beneath the patterns, Text appeared as the shuttle's computer attempted an interpretation. Cease movement. Prepare for escort to examination facility. I can't do that. Elaine responded, though she doubted they could understand her any better than she could understand them. I'm on a diplomatic mission. I need to speak with your leaders. The patterns shifted again. Human presence prohibited. Your kind poses unacceptable risk. What risk? We have never threatened you. We have respected your boundaries for 80 years. Human nature is the risk. History indicates probability of catastrophic outcome. Elaine frowned. Were they judging humanity based on its past? True. Human history was filled with conflict, with violence, but it also contained courage, compassion, and cooperation. You can't judge an entire species based on its past, she argued. We have changed. We have grown. We deserve a chance to prove ourselves. The patterns swirled in what she interpreted as consideration. Temporary communication authorized. Follow escort to designated coordinates. A map appeared on her display, showing a route to a small structure detached from the main habitat. It appeared to be a quarantine facility of sorts. Elaine weighed her options. She could attempt to flee, to reach the Nebula and return to Earth with the partial data she'd acquired. Or she could accept the Nexians' offer, potentially gaining direct diplomatic contact, exactly what her mission had called for. I will follow, she transmitted, but I come as a representative of humanity seeking peaceful dialogue. The pursuit vessels adjusted their formation, creating a corridor that guided rather than trapped. Elaine followed their lead, steering the Whisper toward the designated facility. As they approached, she saw that it was a spherical structure, isolated in space, with a single docking port that irised open at their arrival. The Whisper docked, and Elaine felt a subtle shift as the facility's artificial gravity engaged. The cockpit display indicated that the atmosphere beyond was breathable for humans, a courtesy she hadn't expected. Taking the quantum core with her, Elaine exited the shuttle into a circular chamber whose walls appeared to be made of the same crystalline material as the control interface she had accessed. The room was empty save for a pedestal in its center, which pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. A holographic projection appeared above the pedestal, a Nexian, rendered in exquisite detail. Its 3 limbs were arranged in what Elaine interpreted as a formal stance, and its bioluminescence pulsed in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Text appeared in the air before her frowny face. You have violated the quarantine. Explain your purpose. Elaine straightened her posture. My name is Commander Elaine Chen of the United Earth Force. I come seeking understanding. For 80 years, your civilization has prohibited human contact, human expansion into a quarter of the galaxy. We need to know why. The prohibition is for your protection as much as ours. Humanity is not ready. Not ready for what? Coexistence? Trade? We have maintained peaceful relations with 12 other spacefaring species. We have established diplomatic protocols, cultural exchanges. What makes humans different? The Nexians' patterns shifted rapidly, then settled into a new configuration. Human history indicates aggressive expansion, resource exploitation, conflict resolution through force. These traits, combined with technological advancement, have destroyed civilizations before. Elaine frowned. You have encountered other species like us? We have existed for 50,000 of your years. We have observed the rise and fall of many civilizations. Yours follows a pattern we have seen before, a pattern that ends in devastation unless contained. That's not fair. You are judging us based on a presumed future, not our actual actions. Probability calculations support our conclusion. The prohibition is necessary. Elaine felt frustration building. This was exactly the impasse that had persisted for 80 years. The Nexians' implacable certainty against humanity's indignation at being judged and found wanting. But then she remembered the quantum core still in her hand. It contained Nexian data, perhaps the very calculations they referenced, the historical examples they used to justify their quarantine. I'd like to review your evidence, she said, holding up the core. This device contains data I acquired from your systems. With your permission, I'd like to analyze it fully to understand your reasoning. The Nexians' patterns flickered in what might have been surprise or amusement. The data theft was detected. It is incomplete and will not provide the understanding you seek. Then provide the complete data. If you truly believe your prohibition is justified, prove it. Allow me to see what you see, to understand what you understand." There was a long pause, during which the Nexian's pattern shifted through a complex sequence that the translation couldn't interpret. Finally, text appeared again. "Frowny face, your request is unprecedented, but not unreasonable. A complete data package will be provided, with restrictions on military applications. Return to your vessel for transmission." Elaine nodded, surprised by the concession. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, another message appeared. "Frowny face, Commander Chen. Be aware that if the data confirms our assessment, the prohibition will stand. If your kind cannot accept this, conflict will follow, a conflict you cannot win." It wasn't a threat, Elaine realized. It was a warning, delivered with the dispassionate certainty of a civilization that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless others. "I understand," she replied, "but I hope the data will show another path forward, one where humanity can prove its worth through actions, not predictions." Back aboard the Whisper, Elaine connected the quantum core to the shuttle systems and received the promised data transmission. It was enormous, petabytes of information that would take analysts on Earth years to fully process. But the Nexians had included a summary, translated into human language, that outlined their reasoning. Elaine skimmed the document. A chill settled in her stomach. The Nexians had indeed encountered species similar to humanity before, species that expanded rapidly, that consumed resources at an accelerating rate, that resolved conflicts through force when diplomacy failed. And in every case, these species had eventually collapsed, often taking others with them. But it wasn't just human history that concerned the Nexians. It was human potential. Their models predicted that with access to Nexian territory and technology, humanity would advance too quickly, bypassing the social and ethical development necessary to wield such power responsibly. The result would be catastrophic, not just for humanity, but for all life in the galaxy. Yet, as Elaine continued reading, she found something unexpected in the data, an anomaly in the Nexians' projections. A slim but real possibility that humanity might follow a different path, might prove the exception to the pattern that had repeated throughout cosmic history. That possibility hinged on a factor the Nexians had difficulty quantifying: human adaptability. Unlike previous expansionist species, humans had demonstrated an unusual capacity to change their behavior based on new information, to learn from both success and failure, to reimagine their societies in response to crisis. This trait gave Elaine an idea, a way to challenge the Nexians' prohibition without rejecting their concerns outright. She composed a response, transmitting it to the quarantine facility. "I have reviewed your data, and I understand your caution. But your own models acknowledge the possibility that humanity might avoid the fate of similar species. I propose a compromise, a probationary period during which limited human presence is allowed in designated regions of your territory, under strict oversight. This would provide empirical data to either confirm or refute your projections." The response came quickly. "Frowny face, your proposal has merit but lacks safeguards. What prevents humans from exploiting such access?" "Mutual interest," Elaine replied. "You fear what we might become with unrestricted access to your technology and resources. We fear stagnation without room to grow. A controlled experiment serves both our needs. You get to observe our behavior under controlled conditions, and we get the chance to prove ourselves worthy of trust." There was a longer pause this time, stretching into minutes that felt like hours. Elaine waited, knowing that this moment might represent humanity's best chance to avoid a future of constraint and eventual decline. Finally, the response appeared. "Frowny face, proposal accepted with modifications. A probationary zone will be established at coordinates to be determined. Human presence limited to scientific and diplomatic personnel. Duration, 20 Earth years. Evaluation criteria to be jointly developed. Violation of terms will result in immediate termination of the experiment and reinforcement of the prohibition." Elaine exhaled slowly, hardly daring to believe her success. It wasn't the complete lifting of the prohibition that Admiral Takahashi had hoped for, but it was a breakthrough, the first crack in a barrier that had stood for 80 years. "I accept your terms," she transmitted. "On behalf of humanity, I thank you for this opportunity. We will not waste it." Formal diplomatic channels will be established for detailed negotiations. You are cleared to return to your people with this agreement in principle. Elaine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Her mission, seemingly impossible just days ago, had achieved more than anyone had dared hope. She had not only established contact with the Nexians, but secured a path forward, a chance for humanity to prove its worth. Setting course for the Nebula boundary, she reported. Request guidance to avoid interference with Nexian operations. A navigation route appeared on her display, a clear path through the massive habitats surrounding space. As the Whisper accelerated along the designated trajectory, Elaine couldn't help but look back at the colossal structure that housed the Nexians. It was a testament to what a civilization could achieve given enough time and wisdom, a future that humanity might one day share, if they could prove themselves worthy of it. The Nebula approached, its swirling clouds now a gateway to home rather than a barrier to exploration. Elaine activated the emergency beacon, signaling the Persistence to prepare for her return. As the Whisper entered the luminous mist, she reflected on the immense responsibility that now rested on human shoulders. The Nexians had given humanity a chance, perhaps the only one they would get, to demonstrate that they could overcome their destructive tendencies, that they could wield advanced technology with wisdom, that they could expand without consuming everything in their path, that IT wouldn't be easy. Human nature hadn't fundamentally changed. The drive to explore, to compete, to dominate. These impulses were deeply ingrained. But so was the capacity for cooperation, for empathy, for foresight. The probationary period would test all of these qualities, revealing whether humanity truly deserved a place among the stars. As the Whisper emerged from the nebula, the Persistence appeared in the distance, a welcoming beacon of human achievement. Elaine opened a channel, whispered to Persistence. Mission accomplished, Admiral. I'm coming home, and I'm not alone. Explain, Commander, came Takahashi's voice, tense with anticipation. Elaine smiled. Sir, I have brought back the future. Admiral Takahashi stood before the assembled representatives of the United Earth Council, his weathered face solemn as he presented the findings of Commander Chen's mission. On a massive display behind him, images of the Nexian habitat rotated slowly, its alien grandeur captured in high resolution. Ladies and gentlemen, he concluded, Commander Chen's diplomatic breakthrough represents both an opportunity and a challenge. The Nexians have granted us limited access to their territory, a probationary period during which we can demonstrate that humanity deserves a place among the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Murmurs swept through the chamber. Some delegates appeared elated, others skeptical, a few openly hostile to the idea of proving humanity's worth to alien judges. Admiral, called out the representative from Mars Colony, these terms are humiliating. We are to be confined to a probationary zone, like children under supervision. Why should we accept such restrictions? Takahashi gestured to Elaine, who stepped forward, her uniform crisp, her expression composed despite her exhaustion. She had spent the week since her return to briefing analysts, explaining the enormous data cache she had brought back, and preparing for this moment. Counselor, she said, I have seen what the Nexians have built. I have accessed their historical records. Their concern isn't based on arrogance or a desire to control us. It's based on evidence that species with our characteristics have, in the past, advanced too quickly and destroyed themselves, often taking others with them. So they say, replied the Martian representative. But why should we trust their assessment? Perhaps they simply fear competition. Elaine activated her datapad, and a new image appeared on the display. A simulation based on Nexian models, showing the probable outcome of unrestricted human expansion into their territory. It depicted resource depletion, territorial conflicts, and, ultimately, civilizational collapse. This isn't just their assessment, she explained. Their data, which our own analysts have now partially verified, shows a consistent pattern across thousands of years and hundreds of species. But, and this is crucial, they also acknowledge that humanity has potential they haven't seen before. Our adaptability, our capacity to learn from our mistakes, gives us a chance to break the pattern. The Earth representative leaned forward. And what exactly would we need to demonstrate during this probationary period? That we can advance technologically without becoming more aggressive, Elaine answered. that we can access new resources without exploiting them to exhaustion, that we can interact with a more advanced civilization without either worshiping them or resenting them. In short, that we have matured as a species. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The challenge wasn't merely diplomatic or technological. It was existential. Could humanity transcend its own nature, its deeply ingrained impulses toward expansion and dominance? A move that we accept the Nexians' terms, said the representative from the lunar colonies, breaking the silence. Not because we require their approval, but because they are right. We need to prove to ourselves that we are capable of wielding advanced technology responsibly. If we can't pass their test, we don't deserve to expand further. The motion was seconded, then passed with an overwhelming majority. Humanity had accepted the challenge. 5 years later, Elaine stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, the first human outpost in Nexian space. The station orbited a gas giant in the designated probationary zone, its design emphasizing sustainable resource use and minimal environmental impact. A small contingent of scientists and diplomats worked alongside Nexian observers, exchanging knowledge and gradually building trust. Quite the view, isn't it? Admiral Takahashi said, now retired, but serving as a special advisor to the Human Nexian Integration Project. It is, sir, Elaine replied, watching as a Nexian vessel gracefully docked with the station. Better than I imagined. You know, the Nexians shared something interesting with me yesterday, Takahashi said. Their probability models have shifted. The likelihood of humanity following the destructive path has decreased by 12% since our project began. Elaine smiled. Not enough yet, but we are proving them wrong, one day at a time. That's all we can do, Takahashi agreed. And perhaps that's the point. The Nexians didn't create this probation to test if we are perfect. They wanted to see if we could change, if we could grow. As the airlock cycled and the Nexian delegation entered the observation deck, their bioluminescence pulsing in patterns that Elaine had learned to recognize as cautious optimism, she understood something fundamental about humanity's place in the cosmos. The true strength of her species wasn't in conquering the stars or building ever more powerful technologies. It was in their capacity to face their own flaws, to adapt, to become better than they had been. The universe's most advanced species had drawn a line in the cosmos not to keep humanity contained, but to give them the chance to prove they deserve to be free. And day by day, step by step, that's exactly what they were doing.